Beg your pardon, thank you. Welcome everybody to the special meeting of the West Ada School Board of Trustees. To start, we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join us. So this evening's session starts with a discussion of 3 items. We'll be starting with connectivity for students. This is basically an overview of some of the issues we've had over these past several days getting connections ready. Obviously, these are technical issues. I'm not sure, Trustee Johnson, you called the meeting, so I'm not sure, did you want to say something about this? Or?
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to open it, but to be clear, it takes 2 trustees to call it, so I think, and then you were acceptance, so I think as a board we've called the meeting, which is great. So I think if you want me to kick it off, I'm happy to. I guess
Absolutely,
I should ask that question.
Go for it.
So I think where we're at is we've got to start to talk about how to triage some of the issues, right? We know we've got time is of the essence. We heard from Devin a little bit on Tuesday night. And so the purpose for this discussion was just to understand the severity of the problems that we have around connectivity, because that's the first problem that we need to figure out how to solve. Right now, either in remote or yellow, connectivity not working doesn't allow those 2 systems to work well. And then the other, and these are some things that have come up in feedback around teachers right now, have been experiencing, they're really 2 jobs, right? Their jobs are, not that they signed up for 2 jobs, but this is the jobs that they've been doing. They're trying to teach classes online while trying to provide tech support because the connectivity issues aren't working, which means that there hasn't been time to prep for how to put together all of the curriculum around the online when we pivot to a yellow. So wanting to understand kind of our status on that and where we're at. And then the third thing, and I think this has come up, these were just things that have come up in regular feedback around where our issues are at today. And that was, I can't tell you right now because I don't have any data on it, but there's a number of students who have not been able to get education for the last week. And so that's not fair or right, and so having a discussion around how do we start to address making up those lost school instructional hours for our student body was the reasons for these discussions items. Now, I'd actually pivot it to Trustee Ozuna because I think both of us together as 2 trustees, and it has the law requires, both of us were the ones who pushed to have a discussion tonight and start to figure out how to address the issues that are facing our school system today. So I would yield the rest of the time to Trustee Ozuna.
Thank you, Trustee Johnson. I agree with what you said there. You know, this is a big issue for our families right now. The families that are impacted by this are in crisis mode, and the teachers that are impacted by this, and our school administrators that are impacted by this that I've heard from, they are in crisis mode. And I felt like it's very important for us to come back together and talk about where we stand right now, and also where do we go from here? Realistically, what does this look like for us so that we can talk about what we may need to do tomorrow and the next days if this is going to continue on for days. I don't want to rehash why we're here because I don't think that that's important right at this moment. I think what's important is that we get the connectivity established and that we meet as a board so that if there are any changes that the board has power to grant you, that we're here for you to talk about that so that we can really help get the connectivity solved. The reality is, I don't know how my colleagues feel, but we're not prepared to put our students in class all day, every day. I don't think as a district that we're prepared for that. So we have to be able to make this connectivity work, whether we're remote, whether we're in yellow, or frankly, even if we ever get to green, we still have to have our connectivity issues working because we're going to have quarantine situations, and we need to have that. So I just thought that it was very important for us to get together and have this open dialogue about where we're at, realistically what our timing looks like, and where do we go from here.
Thank you both. I truly appreciate that. Mr. Lashman, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to call you up, but my understanding, if I can just give a quick summary of what I'm assuming you're probably going to say, is that the real heart of the problem is with a filtering system. I know you brought this out to parents before, and it's a new system, new as of like, what, May, June? Is that correct? It's that new system that's basically having the most issues, it seems.
Chairman Klopfenstein, I'm not sure exactly what you're referencing. I think since we last spoke on Tuesday, as part of our efforts moving forward, we've been trying to communicate to our parents and to the board more directly and more frequently with information. So I'm not sure exactly what you're addressing, but our filtering system, the existing system, has been in place actually when we implemented that over a year ago. When we rebuilt, there were 3 things that happened at that time. We rebuilt our core infrastructure. We installed a new filtering, a next-gen firewall, and the filtering appliances. And it was critical that we did all 3 of those at the same time, because we wanted to make sure that as we built that infrastructure out, they're all very tied together. And we wanted to make sure that we built the system for the capacity that we had in the future. These are systems that get purchased only every 5, 6, maybe even 7 years is when the refresh cycle is on the equipment in these areas. And so when you make a purchase there, you have to be very thoughtful about the money you're spending, the vendors that you partner with, and be planning for what you think is going to be happening in the future. And so as we did that, we made sure that all of our core infrastructure, our filtering system, and our internet access and our next-gen firewall would support 40 gigs of connectivity through our system, which far exceeded where we were at the time. At the time, our sustained internet connectivity outside of the district was about 3 gigabytes. And so I guess I should say the last thing that got implemented at that time was actually a new internet connection as well. So all of those things were done in tandem. And it was actually a blessing at the time, because we were able to partner with our next-gen firewall vendor, our filtering vendor, on how we would architect and put everything together. And of course, an attempt to, if we ever had to, when we started expanding our capacity, we'd be prepared and we wouldn't have issues like we're seeing today. So those systems have been in place and running for quite some time. I think it should be noted that on a regular and consistent daily basis, we have over 30,000 devices that connect to our wireless system, and we have an additional 3 to 4,000 desktop devices that we filter on a daily basis. So our systems, we felt, were prepared to handle the load that we might see. Of course, none of that had COVID in mind. None of that had a one-to-one implementation. None of that had remote learning in mind. All of those are new things that came along. And we attempted to adjust. We worked with our partners, making sure that we expanded our filtering capacity in preparation for remote learning. And so we added additional servers this summer to the existing system to expand our capacity. So I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to about the system being new, but no, it's been well established and has been functioning, I think, quite well for the last year.
So you said you had 40 gig as capability. What's the current bandwidth, I guess, on a normal day without the outside traffic? Currently, is it like half that, or?
If we were in normal circumstances, we would be sending about 3 gigabits of sustained traffic to the internet every day. So that's everybody on site and us accessing the internet. Right now, because we have connections coming in from the outside and then going out, our maximum bandwidth has hit about 18 gig, and our capacity there is 20 gig, but we do have the capacity to expand with on the fly. It just happens if we need it, our bandwidth can go all the way to 40 gig. So what I can share with the board and from a detailed perspective about what we've done to troubleshoot these issues is we've been looking at the capacity of all of the things in our system that are responsible for making sure that filtering works properly. That's our internet connection, that's our next-gen firewall, That's the network infrastructure that carries the traffic from the internet through our infrastructure, through the firewall, from the firewall to the filters, all of those pieces and our filtering infrastructures. And from a connectivity perspective, what I can say is that we have partnered with industry standard and experts with the equipment that we have. And we are not seeing any errors in our environment. We are not seeing overutilization in any of our equipment. We are not seeing the CPUs on any of our equipment that is being overloaded or overtaxed. What we do know is that our firewall is maintaining 47,000 connections on a consistent basis, yet our filtering solution is only able to construct and manage between 12 to 15,000 connections at a time. And what we believe is that even though all of the things appear to be working properly, there is something somewhere in our environment where either our firewall, our network switch is operating at a capacity that has exceeded the specifications. It's supposed to be operating at this level, yet for some reason, because of a code revision or something, it just isn't. And what's happening, we believe, is that when the traffic leaves our firewall and goes to the content filter, there's a delay of some kind. And what is happening is the connection, the VPN connection in the firewall, in the filter, begins to get established. The traffic is somehow interrupted, and that connection then is stalled. Then, because it stalls, it's maintained for a period of time, but it's not active. The client will attempt to reconnect, and it might start establishing a new connection on a new filtering appliance, and those connections are just overtaxing, and the system is basically just saying, there are too many errors happening here and too many connection reattempts, and it's just not able to generate those and sustain the number of sessions. Frankly, given the amount of technical expertise that we have brought to bear, just both inside the district from our local partners and from our manufacturing partners and the supports that have been provided, I think we've extinguished our near-term opportunity to figure out exactly what's wrong with that. To that end, we have been pursuing other strategies to get a resolution to this. I published that today, that we have a backup plan. We have been testing that today. I have to admit that the testing has gone well, but it's very limited. When you're talking about 40,000 devices, sending updates and being able to install a classroom of 30 or 40 and a few devices across the district and making sure that things go well, that's just not a lot of testing. But time is of the essence, and as of today, and as of right now, we're ready to take steps to install our backup strategy. What we are trying to decide tonight is how drastic, how far do we go? Do we risk it all, and do we push this update to every workstation that we possibly can, and in the hopes that this resolves the issue? With the testing we've done, we believe so. We believe it could be successful. But technical issues happen, as we are experiencing. And my fear is that the people who are connecting, we might do more harm than good, and we might actually impact their ability to access our systems, and there could be a downside. And I'm trying to weigh that. I don't really know. I have my suspicions about the number of people who are connecting to our systems using our devices. I believe that's somewhere between 10 and 20,000. Realistically, I think it's closer to about 15,000, because those are the connections that I see in our filter. We are seeing some very positive things, I should say, about the number of people who have found alternative ways to connect to our system. We have 10,000 people logging into our apps.westada portal every day. We have over 39,000 people that access our Teams environment today, 39,000 different individual users. So people are finding a way to access things, but it's not good. We are not meeting the needs of all of our students, and I'm here to make sure that we do. And so we are willing and prepared to take drastic measures, but we're weighing carefully our next steps. We want to instill or win back the trust that we think we have gained over the last few years on how we manage our technology. I think we do a very good job at that. And if I had a smoking gun and I could tell you, you know, look, we just missed something. We should have done something. We should have done something different. This is the error. It's our fault. We didn't understand. We didn't know. I would tell you that is our culture inside of our team. We establish that as a team norm. We take responsibility for the issues and the problems that we may cause in our environment, and we meet on those. And when we take responsibility, we find ways to do better. But I haven't been able to find that. I can't give the public, I cannot give the board that smoking gun. I cannot tell you it's our filtering system. I cannot tell you it's our firewall. I cannot tell you it's the way we have our network configured. I cannot tell you it's our network equipment. What I can tell you is we're continuing to pursue every opportunity to figure that out, and we are doing some very creative things with our internet service provider tonight to both expand our capacity for filtering tomorrow. That could have some drastic impacts, could let up to another 20,000 students access our system. And that will tell us more about what's going on in our system using some of the resources that are going to be made available through both our filter vendor, who has given us additional equipment, and our internet service provider, who is helping us with a firewall solution, and that will connect some of our students to our filtering solution. So I apologize. Maybe that was too long of an explanation. I know the board is looking for specifics, and perhaps it's best that I stop and ask for, stand for any questions to see if I can address your specific concerns.
Excuse me, I did have a few. Actually, one of the ones I was curious about. So we have kind of run out of possibilities for at least for experience at this point. We've hit every angle we possibly can. And then your plan B, would it be, so if we try tomorrow, if your team tries tomorrow, and we still run into issues, going yellow every other day, that lack of load on the system, would that make a difference in how things would work?
Chairman Klopfenstein, help me see if I can remember both of your questions. The first one, I'm sorry, sir.
Well, I beg your pardon. Actually, everything's based on really just one idea. The issue seems to be a load issue. And so by going into yellow, where we'd have half the kids basically remote and the other kids who would be in class, does that take enough load off the system, cutting the population in half? Does that take enough load off the system where you think even the current configuration would actually probably take that load?
Chairman Klopfenstein, you are correct. When we work on our system, you know, and we're having issues, it's when all of our students are trying to connect. That starts about 8:30 in the day. And at that point in time, that's our best opportunity to triage what's happening and investigate what's going on. But we have to be very careful at that time to not disrupt what's happening. So although we're analyzing and looking at things, that gives us ideas at that time to then implement when the load comes off the system. So then we implement those changes, and you're right, when we do not have as big a load as we're seeing in the evenings, we can get the filters and our system to perform exceptionally. In fact, some of the things that we found working all night last night really improved the performance of the system, but we still found this morning that under load, it's not working properly. So based upon the numbers that I'm seeing today and the work that we have done, I do not believe that the system would function properly or well enough for half of our students to connect remotely. I believe we will still need to implement our backup solution to help transition to that. I just think that we have to move in a new direction, and I think every day that we lose is unfair to those students who can't connect to our system. And we are working desperately to solve this problem. And we're really at the point, I think that your first point was, we have some very technical work that is being done to analyze our traffic, but that traffic is so massive, it will take, I think, a considerable amount of time, and I don't know that it will yield any results. So that's what I mean. We are still working on figuring out what the technical issue is, and we still have ideas that we're working on there, but we are starting to focus on our alternative plans to make sure that students can access our systems remotely.
If you tried that plan in blocks, so instead of using all the students at one time, possibly doing, cutting them in fours, say, groups of fours by grade level, say, and then having them log on at different times, would that make a difference, or is that something you've already thought and decided not set against?
Chairman Klopfenstein, that's exactly the strategy we're working on, but it's complicated. The problem is that we need to install the update on systems that are already connecting to ensure that we free up capacity for other systems to connect. So I'm really at the chicken and egg kind of stage. If I could make changes to devices and target the ones that aren't able to connect in an attempt to fix those while leaving the devices that are working alone, that would be ideal. But given our capabilities, because everything is remote, and given how the alternative strategy has to be implemented, we have to replace the agent, and then we have to install some configuration settings on the devices. Those devices have to connect to us somehow for that to happen. And so the strategy, while sound, may not yield results fast enough. The best and the quickest way to do this would be to make the update. We can basically begin pushing the update to machines. We can notify our parents that we are prepared to risk it all in an attempt to make sure that our students have access tomorrow, and ask them to turn their devices on, and we will begin pushing updates in the background to every device. Our testing and our belief and our hope would be that as devices get this new update, they free up capacity, they stop communicating to our system and generating those VPN sessions, allowing additional devices to connect, and basically will cause a cascading effect that will improve the situation as the patch rolls out. I have tremendous trust and faith in the people who work with me. But I also have been doing and implementing technology for a long period of time, and I know sometimes there are just unforeseen circumstances and things that you cannot plan for. And I just worry about risking it all with the limited amount of testing that we've done. The solution that we're implementing is a solution, it's a tried and true solution. It's a method of filtering that's been in place. I implemented my first version of this method of filtering called using a proxy pack file. In my first implementation in the late 90s, early 2000s. This technology has been around a long time. We know it can be successful. I just worry because there are just a lot of circumstances or unforeseen circumstances with all of these devices being off our network.
I guess one final question I had. So let's just kind of maybe play out a scenario. So if Plan B doesn't do what you were hoping for, is there a Plan C?
Well, Chairman Klopfenstein, our Plan B, if things don't work out, as students come on premise next week and they bring their devices on prem, we would be able to push that update and solve this problem, really in big leaps and bounds. I just feel like every day is important. We have an educational calendar. We have our teaching professionals who take advantage of every moment of every day. I think it's unfair to not give them the opportunity and give them every day that we possibly can. But that's maybe Plan B.1, that we have another opportunity next week to resolve the issue, and we know that we could solve that problem, and we know that it could be resolved as students come on site for learning next week. That also freeing up that bandwidth and having additional bandwidth where students are not connecting in from the outside, that will give us another opportunity. So I think worst case, in leaps and bounds, we could solve this problem, in the early days of next week. With our testing, I feel very confident in saying that. We have a couple of different approaches to testing. We are contemplating testing with a single building and rolling that out, and then starting to roll out the patch tomorrow, and that's another opportunity we're considering. As to Plan B, are there Plans C, D, and E? there are multiple plans. We have been working on many, many ideas, and a lot of them range from all sorts of scenarios. Some are removing our filter, the current filter altogether, and implementing a form of filtering that provides just minimal SIPA compliance when students are off of our network. Some of them involve our vendors helping us generate VPN or firewalls in the cloud that can scale to massive sizes that our workstations could connect to, and a number of options in between. And we're exercising one of those kind of out-of-the-box thinking ideas right now with our internet provider. The problem that I have with those is that some of these ideas, while on paper are great ideas and they would work very well, they are not easy to implement. And they're just as risky as some of the other things that we're doing. They're probably even riskier because they're new technologies. They're things that our technology team does not know how to manage or maintain. And they require us deploying agents to our servers and installing software that we haven't been able to test. So we don't have a lot of other good scenarios. I think our best scenario is our plan to implement the alternative solution, which is switching over the method and using our current vendor, but switching the method in which our workstations connect to the district infrastructure. But we are investigating all of those alternative plans, and they may come into fruition at other times because we are very thoughtful about how we spend money in technology in this district, and we're very thoughtful around the services that we have to provide to our students and to our staff. Given how large our network is and how many devices and people connect to our network on a daily basis, we have to establish a number of devices that have failover and fault tolerance in them at a level that most school districts do not see. So given the issues that we've had, we believed that we had that fault tolerance built into our system, but something is wrong. And when we discover what that is, we will work to address it.
Is there something that this board could do possibly to help in terms of either acquisition of equipment or services?
Trustee Chairman Klopfenstein, I appreciate that offer, and if I knew what that was, I already would have been moving forward on making a purchase. I know that I have the support of district administration, and I think it's appropriate to acknowledge that we've had a number of people in our community who are patrons of this district with significant technical expertise, and many of them are offering to support in any way that they can. We've even had people who have help desk experience offering to answer phones. And we will take advantage of whatever support and assistance we feel like we can manage. We feel like through the support contracts and our purchases that we've made, we have the technical expertise from the vendors who help us purchase from and help us install those devices, and then from the companies when we escalate issues up to them that they're helping us address those issues. But sometimes that outside help is helpful in different ways. When you can just describe to another person who has technical experience or technical skills, even though you're not working on the details, when you describe the problem, you're talking to them about it, they might ask questions, and they might not have the solution, but it might help you think about the problem in another way. People who are offering to answer phones for us, we're struggling to find a way to take advantage of that help. We sometimes can't provide people who are not employees of the district access to our systems because there's confidential information in there, and so their ability to help us in some of those areas is just limited. As I previously stated, since we cannot identify exactly where we are having a problem, I don't know what I would purchase, and that's why we're moving forward with our Plan B.
Thank you Thank you very much. I truly appreciate this.
Mr. Chairman.
Trustee Smiley.
Thank you. Devin, you know, I kind of feel like the football coach that, you know, started NFL tonight, and I'm missing a game, but that's okay. You know, first 3 times we've touched the ball, we've turned it over, and the other team now has 3 touchdowns on us. It's, you know, I think one thing that's really important to do is to keep our focus and do what we can do, because I want to get the kids back in class. I think all of us do. Monday morning, are we ready to roll Monday morning with kids in class? Do the teachers have the equipment they need? Do they have the expertise they need to get things rolling? Has that been sufficient? Because I'm hearing anecdotally, and that's never an accurate way to do it, but I'm hearing anecdotally that some feel they're prepared and others don't. And how are we doing with our staff? How are we doing in the buildings? Are we ready to roll when the kids show up on Monday?
Chairman Kloppenstein, Trustee Smiley, I'm going to take this opportunity to share that the technology department has had a number of conversations with patrons, and it's never easy to talk to somebody who's upset over the job that you have attempted to do. But the conversations that I've had have been incredible. It's been an opportunity for us to see the best in our community. I've had some very angry people who, by the time we're done sharing and they understand the commitment that I have, that my team has, to what this district is trying to accomplish, they offer to be part of a test group. They offer to do anything that they can. And I want to let those people know how important we believe this is. I'd like to share an analogy. I feel like the start of the school year for technology has been the start of a family vacation gone wrong. You get in the car and you head down the road and you have tire trouble. And you pull over and you fix the tire and you think you're ready to go. And you get another mile down the road and the air conditioner goes out. And you pull over and you decide, well, we're just going to go with it. We can get by without air conditioning. You get another mile down the road and the fan belt goes. And now you're stuck on the side of the road and there's nothing you can do. And all you can do is wait and for the tow truck to come and help you. And when you look at the issues and you get to the service department and you realize, you know, it's not the car you're driving. It's not whether you took care of the car and you did all the proper maintenance. It's not the path you took. Just there was something wrong with that car and there was an issue that had to be addressed. And when you're talking to the mechanic and the mechanic can't tell you what it is, it's frustrating. And that's been our journey. As to are we prepared for next week? Yes, when students come on premise, we're prepared for them to use their devices on site. We do that every day. We've been doing that for years. As I mentioned, our wireless system, last year, we supported over 30,000 different devices connecting to our wireless system across our district. We filter those, all those devices, including personal devices that connect to that network, and the 3,000 to 4,000 desktop computers that we have. So we believe we're ready for that. And as those devices come onto our system, we're prepared to implement changes that will help them connect remotely when they participate in remote learning the next day. As to your question around staff, I'll just say I'm not the best person to answer that question. What I can tell you is that I'm sure that we have staff who are more prepared than others. We have staff who have already participated and done remote learning, and they're more prepared than those who've spent the last 20 or 30 years of their career teaching in a classroom and not having a computer and not having to teach remotely. And I can only imagine how difficult that transition is for them. And I can only share with you how how difficult it is for us in technology to know that we haven't been able to make that a little easier for them.
Mr. Chairman, you know, I think I appreciate what you said. I do, but you know, I'm getting, all of us are getting a lot of input from patrons and parents that, you know, range from the supportive to the very, very upset. And I'm sure you've gotten a lot of the same. And, you know, I want to be able to answer with a clear yes. We are ready to roll on Monday. We're going to make it work. And I also am hearing from a lot of staff that feel exactly the same way. Some of them feel that they've had some training and they're ready, and others indicate that they got a lot of general stuff, but nothing in the specifics. Are we ready to roll Monday morning?
Chairman Klopfenstein, Trustee Smiley, we are going to be prepared to roll Monday morning. Are there going to be issues? Is everything going to be resolved? We are prepared to work all weekend to resolve every possible issue we can, but this is technology, and as I've stated before, I can't pinpoint exactly what the problem is. So I cannot promise that there are not going to be issues into next week. What I can tell you is that we're committed to every effort possible to resolve those issues and provide access to our students both on-site and remotely. If you'd like more information around teacher preparedness, I think perhaps you know, Superintendent Heller, Assistant Superintendent Heller might be more appropriate to answer and address some of those other questions.
Trustee Smiley, did you have any other questions?
Well, you know, I just want a clear answer to that question. You know, as far as, you know, one of the things I always did when I taught, I learned real early that things crashed, you know, when it comes to technology. I always had a file cabinet full of lessons that I could go to if the technology didn't work. And, you know, so I hope that we all have plenty of handouts and plenty of other ways to teach. And I know our good teachers will. We have an amazing bunch of teachers and we have great people. I'm confident, but, you know, that is a big concern because I've heard from a lot of parents and I've heard from a lot of staff too. They're concerned and I think they're very right to be. And I want to be able to assure them that we are moving heaven and earth to make sure when those kids come in, learning is going to take place.
Chairman Klopfenstein, Chairman Klopfenstein, Trustee Smiley, with the resources I have, I feel like I am moving the portion of heaven and earth that I can, that I have the ability to do so. I think we've been very creative with the resources that we have, and I have asked the world of my team, and I have a group of people and individuals who are willing to step up and do whatever it takes. We literally, with our filtering vendor last night, at 10:30, transitioned our case to an engineer in Australia so that work could continue all night long. So while the filtering vendor could bring on additional resources to help us, my staff had to figure out a way to be able to respond to that work that was being done all night long. And I'm not complaining. Sometimes that's the job in technology. And my staff understands that. They believe in the mission of this district, and they believe in what we are doing, and they're willing to give. It's just at a very unfortunate time. This team has been stressed to try and provide services since COVID closed the district in March, and we have been, you know, trying to provide resources at a number of levels, and we've been running very hard. But we will continue to pursue that. Anecdotally, I had a conversation with a high school principal today, and she told me she reaffirmed to me that we do have an amazing staff. Regardless of the technology issues, she told me they've only not been able to engage with 66 of their students. So they've reached out, they're finding ways, despite the technology issues, to reach out to students. They are amazing. That's why we hired them. That's why they work in West Ada. And that's why we empower our teachers to do what they do. Regardless, it's not fair in this environment for any student not to be able to connect to our systems. And that's our sole goal right now. And that's why we are, you know, setting on the back burner, trying to resolve the primary issues and moving to the secondary approach, which we believe will resolve the issues and provide the connectivity that we need. We also are prepared to take additional measures once that connectivity issue is resolved. We know that there will be other issues that people will have with the devices that they have. And we are making plans to make sure that we have access on our service desk to handle those calls. But the amount of volume and the amount of calls that we're receiving so far is staggering for the 4 people that we have assigned to the service desk position today. I have some statistics on that, but I don't know that it bears repeating. We're receiving a lot of calls because things aren't working well. It's obvious. So, but we need to be prepared for that next phase. So we're working on our current plans, we're working on the future, and we're working on what it's going to take to get connectivity as soon as possible.
Any other trustees with questions? Trustee Ozuna?
That's a lot of information, and I am not that technical. So I want to just make sure that I understand more in layman's terms about what maybe this looks like moving into next week. Obviously, you're going to work on things tomorrow, and there'll be a lot of students hitting it, so you'll be able to try that out. Over the weekend, you'll be working on things with way less traffic, though, so you probably might not know. With that, I would encourage you, a lot of people have access to information. So if you wanted to run a test, I bet you could send an email and get quite a few people to give it a try. I'll just throw that out there as an option. But this is what I want to understand, I guess, getting into Monday, and you would have Team 1 there on Monday. You would run, worst case scenario, I guess, in this plan. You would run updates on Team 1 devices while they're in the building. What's not going to be so great is Team 2 that's remote at home. Going into Tuesday, and I imagine those at home some would get through though, right? Because it's working for some and some traffic. Going into Tuesday then, ideally, those people that got the updates in Team 1 would be online working remotely on the Tuesday, and Team 2 that's in the building would get their updates. Going into Wednesday, whether you're in person or remote, the updates would have happened and things would be working. Do I understand that right?
Chairman Klopfenstein, Trustee Ozuna, that's a very accurate summary. That would be our worst case scenario. I believe we are coming up with a way for parents, if they have a device that's not working, that they could attempt to install the update and the fix in off hours in the evenings over the weekend, and we're working on making sure that that fix is available so that come Monday, when half of our students are on-prem and everything is, we're updating their workstations here, that the 20,000 students who are home, we already know we can support about 15,000 of those. We might have enough capacity and solved enough problems at that time that most of those issues could be resolved. But in a worst case scenario, you're correct that by Wednesday of next week, this update would be pushed out to almost every workstation.
To follow up to that, I could live with Tuesday. Beyond that, like, I think we're in serious trouble, and I'll use high school as an example with our block schedule and the virtual schoolhouse for middle school and high school with our block schedule. If we go 2 full weeks of this, that is 1/4 of a semester for these kids. And if we have kids that are using other devices to get online, we cannot consider that good education. If you're watching instruction off of a cell phone, that is not quality. You cannot follow what's happening there. I think we need to be very aware of what this looks like. So if we were to go beyond Tuesday, I can live with Tuesday, but if we were to go beyond Tuesday, like, we need a plan now for what Wednesday looks like, kind of running that plan in parallel to the work that you're doing. And I don't think you're responsible for that plan, but I think others need to come alongside and create something so that we know we've got to have a date where we need to do something different. So,
Chairman Klopfenstein, Trustee Ozuna, as to the plan, we are working multiple paths at this current time to make sure that we increase capacity so that as soon as possible, we can connect every student that we can to our system. So if you think about the work that we're doing this evening by adding additional filtering servers to our environment, if that works well, you know, we could be adding another 10,000 students connecting tomorrow. which in remote learning on Monday, that means everybody should be able to connect. Unless you're having trouble with the device, which we know there's going to be some of that as well, and that's where our plans for providing support at the service desk level will have to come into play. And so we are working multiple avenues to try and make sure, at least from a technology perspective, we can get connectivity as soon as possible. And I agree. I feel like 3 days is already too long. And that's why there's a part of me that just wants to risk it all and say, folks, we've tested this. This is our best effort. We're ready to risk it all. I just don't want to make the situation worse. But if we did risk it all and it did not pay off, Monday would then be the day when we'd have to start fixing, half of the devices. So it's a difficult decision.
Trustee Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we've talked a lot about the devices. I want to talk about the service because there's two things happening right now. So first of all, let me say, Devin, thank you. You're answering a lot of questions, some that aren't even in your wheelhouse, so appreciate that. Also, tonight's not about defending where we've been. It's about figuring out where we go. So I want to put you on your toes and not on your heels. I want you to be there with me. We're all on our toes.
Chairman Klopfenstein, Trustee Johnson, I'm smiling.
Okay, good. I can't see it. These masks are awful. Great, but awful. Cliff will kill me for saying that with my Mountain View mask on. So as we go through this, I think I'm with Trustee Azuna. If we think we can get full connectivity by Tuesday based on what we know today, and we know some of it's assumption, right? Nothing in this world right now is solid and perfect. Part of that's going to require some service and support. And I don't believe, based on what I have seen from our teachers, that we can turn everybody back to their teachers and say, help them install this stuff or figure this out. So I want to know from you, what do we give you or help you with? What roadblocks and barriers do we remove out of the way so that you have enough help desk support to get our parents the support they need to do that? And there is anything you ask for, I'm willing to try and get.
Chairman Klopfenstein, Trustee Johnson, members of the board, I understand that you have a difficult job, and part of your responsibility is to ask critical questions. And I understand that my role in the district requires that at times like this, I have to answer those critical questions. So I appreciate your support, and please ask any questions that you have. As to providing support, there are a couple of options to us. We have the ability to put, we currently have 4 people who man the service desk. We have field technicians who have been trained and have done rotations on the service desk, and they have all of the same technical expertise that our service desk technicians have. In fact, our IT manager, Kevin Denton, and our IT supervisor, Josh White, have been very good at making sure that those job descriptions are the same. Just the role that person does and what they do for us is in just a different location. One person happens to sit at the service desk and answer the phone. Another person just happens to be in the field. We are prepared with our current licensing to be able to have 20 people on the phones at any one time. In an emergency situation, I suppose we could look at trying to add additional capacity to that, purchasing additional licenses, and then we could put a few more individuals, but really inside the technology team, we only really have 20 to 25 people who could be on that service desk answering those calls. The remaining members of the team have different jobs, and their technical expertise lays in other areas, and asking them to be put on the service desk is either taking them away from addressing the filtering solution issues or addressing other issues for the district, or puts them in a position where they're not going to be best serving our community. I do think that one of the ideas that we have published is that if people have device issues, that they might be able to go to their local building and get some service and support. That would involve asking some of our computer professionals in our elementary schools to be available. They have a lot of skills and experience with their devices. They could also contact the service desk, and we're asking them a lot of those people, but those are some of the creative ideas that we've had. I think one of the burdens that money and nothing can solve is that we're still answering service desk tickets and helping our teachers with technology because, as you all know, with COVID, our technology is still coming in. It's all deployed now. Our teachers have their new devices, but there are issues. Anytime you do a deployment, there are devices that don't function properly. They have to be re-imaged. There's some that have to be replaced. There's always issues during school startup. And it would require us to abandon all of those efforts in an attempt to help our patrons access things remotely. I happen to think that that might just have to be what we do for now, and we have to balance that. We know that if a teacher's having certain issues and significant issues, we have to go address that so that they can teach. But some of the other issues may just have to be left until we can resolve some of these major issues that our people are having. So that's, the plans that I'm working on now to address the service and support perspective. But if you think about it, 40,000 people calling into the service desk is a big ask.
So Devin, let me ask the question a little bit different, because luckily, maybe fortunately for me, the company I work at, most of the employees there have students in West Ada, so I get to hear a lot of good stories. We also have a pretty large technology staff, and conversations happen, and I think these happen all over the valley right now. But just installing updates doesn't require a person to be on our network to help parents install updates, right? I mean, if you're technical help and you can walk through instruction by instruction, just helping students. So what I'm trying to figure out is, can we get you some support, either contract support or local community support, to even just help with getting the updates set up? Because I'm pretty tech savvy and I can do that, and there are a lot of parents who can do it, but there's also a lot of, we've got kids in daycare who are taking their devices into their daycare, and we're asking, YMCA staff who are managing 12 or 15 kids to also have to try and do that. So I'm trying to figure out, I think we got to think outside the box here. Can we actually use some of that local support that's there for us? And I mean, I know my company's willing to do it, and I know you've said others are too. So I guess what I'm looking for is, how do we make sure that because the support is the issue. I mean, all the other issues you've got on technology, we can't help you with. You just got to find the problem and solve it. Yeah. But the support, the patron support, having 600-700 minute waits on Monday won't help you. Yeah. So that's what I'm looking. If we can, unclog that tunnel, I guess. Yeah. Chairman Klopfenstein, Trustee Johnson, I appreciate the out-of-the-box, quote-unquote, I'm sure that term gets overused, thinking. And to be honest, given the amount of time that we're spending in, in-depth troubleshooting and trying to solve this problem, I have to say I'm not sure I'm in a state where I'm prepared to think that far out of the box. I would not turn down any offers of help. My only concern is, how do we use those effectively? It is one thing, this update that we're talking about, we have scripted, it can work in the background if a device can connect. So the question is, if the device can't connect, if you have somebody who's not part of our system, what are they going to help the person with? What answer, when they have expanded the technical knowledge that they have, where does that call go, and who answers that? And the issue right now is there's not any amount of technical expertise you're going to be able to do to solve that connectivity issue. If we can't establish that VPN connection, that device can't connect to anything. And that's where we have this chicken and egg issue that we're having. If we can't free up or create some capacity for workstations to connect to us to update, I could have hundreds of people sitting there waiting for calls, but they're not going to have anything to do. I do think we've been creative in trying to create some of those resources. We're publishing how-tos. We're calling parents. They are using those. Some of the instructions are
you know, it's just like, oh, it's on an iPad. I can just click those buttons. I easily do that. People are managing. They have their phones. They know how to follow those kinds of instructions. So a lot of people are able to self-serve. But there are going to be some of those problems. Sometimes we're trying to publish videos. Those all help as well. So we're trying to be creative. I would take any ideas that we have for that and any offers of assistance. I have to go back to my team and see how we might be able to creatively use that support. From a budget perspective, we certainly would need a couple of things. We'd have to put some infrastructure in place. We'd need to expand the licensing on our call system. And but even that, as I think about it, standing here, you know, in the moment, you know, we have other features of our system, including chat support and callback support, and maybe people could be used for some of those things. What I struggle with is, as we look at the calls that have come in over this week, I think our communication is helping. People are understanding that there's issues, and our emails are, I'm sure, still frustrating, but they know that we're working on it, and they know that it's not better yet. And so they're not calling. We are still getting calls for, I don't know my username and password. And even those calls, I would love to have somebody, just a group of people to say, hey, answer these calls. But that's difficult because when somebody calls up on the phone, you have to ask them some questions. You have to validate who they are and make sure that you're giving a person access to student information, their username and password, and know that with some reasonable certainty that the person on the other end of the line is who they say they are and they have the right to that information. Well, the only way you can get access to that information is by getting access to our databases. I can't give a person who's not an employee of our district access to that data. So there are just some hurdles around that, but I'm sure that there are there's some things in there that we could explore, and we are willing to explore. Our IT manager, Kevin Denton, is here this evening, and I know when I get out of this meeting, he will have a list of 5 things that we might be able to do to take advantage of those kinds of support. That's the kind of person he is. That's the kind of employee that we have inside of our team. So I'm happy to try and take that back and come back with some ideas.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to I know you always love when I ask more than 2 questions, so I'm going to ask the third, and I'm going to put them together. So 1, could we authorize something for you tonight to allow you to do that without the board having to meet? That's one question. You can think on it and come back with that. You don't have to think that right now. And then the other question is, can we as a board, should we count on being ready to pivot on Tuesday if things aren't working? And being ready, like be pre-prepared for that. Like, I'm thinking ahead to like the backup plan, right? So we always trust and hope for the best, and you've got some strategies you're going to deploy that sound like we can get there, and that's our plan A. But should we as a board be prepared on Tuesday for a backup plan if we can't get to where we need to?
Chairman Kloppenstein, Trustee Johnson, just a point of clarification. I think, are you asking if I need to spend money to explore some of these ideas and be prepared, do I need board action? Is that the first part of your question?
Yeah, anything. I'm actually even going as far as, and it'd take a little bit of time to think through, but I think what Trustee Ozuna said was we're in crisis mode, and when you're in crisis mode, you triage and you survive. So I'm thinking of it like that. So what do we need to do to triage, make sure that the triage happens and you survive?
Chairman Kloppenstein, Trustee Johnson, thanks for the clarification. Based upon the ideas that we've been sharing just in this discussion, I don't think there would be any board action needed for me to expand the capacity of the systems that we have. If we wanted to explore something like outsourcing and hiring a group of people to answer calls and enter service tickets, for example, so that we could provide additional customer service and be able to triage, collect the issues and then sort them out and have somebody prioritize. Some of those might require board action depending on the amount of money that might be spent, but I don't believe in the short term that I have anything that I would need board action on. If I'm looking to expand the current systems that we have already gone through all of the necessary purchasing processes to acquire those systems, which means that if we have to expand those systems, we can spend that money and we don't have to go out for RFP or anything like that. And I know that the district understands the importance of this, and so I think we would work on whatever we had to do to try and make sure that the funds were available. So I think that's the answer I have, at least at this time, to the first part of your question. Again, if we did something very out of the box, then there are all sorts of things that come into play, and I'm not sure in some of those that the board action could even address some of those. If we were going to purchase some services, depending on the amount that we were spending, Idaho law comes into play, and we would have to go out to RFP, we would have to do certain things to be able to execute those purchases. So I don't have an example of what that might be, but those are the constraints that I can think of today. The second part of your question, how do we be prepared to pivot, another word that's been used tremendously during the COVID crisis. I think that every day when we work with our vendors to analyze what's going on in our system, we learn things and we have additional ideas. So I haven't shared with the board, I'm happy to talk more about it, but it's not like we just have a plan A and a plan B. We have multiple plan A, B, and C's, but there are lots of things that we're doing inside of those first couple of options that we have to give us additional capacity and be prepared for next week, next Monday and Tuesday. So for example, let's say that our testing tonight, by adding our 2 new filtering appliances to the firewall that's going to be fronted by our vendor, if we're able to get, let's say, 5,000 students connected, 7,000 students connected to those devices, that's the capacity of those boxes. It's about somewhere between 7,000 and 10,000 students. Our remaining 4 devices, we might be able to provision quickly and move them over to the environment and solve the problem immediately. So as we implement and test these solutions, we get other ideas that help us, give us other options. And that's just the nature of troubleshooting this kind of situation. You learn every time you make a change, you learn something and it gives you more options, you learn more, and you have more options for what to do next.
Devin, sorry, I might want to be more clear, because I'm with you. I mean, I've had to pause system implementations before myself, but we as a board have a responsibility to have a spot where we go, okay, this isn't working anymore. And I don't want to limit you in your creativity and capacity and capability to get us to a spot. So what I'm trying to understand from you is Tuesday a good point where we say, I think what I've heard is working through the Monday some students are in and Tuesday some students are in. If we feel like we gotten good connectivity, we can validate in the data that we've got good connectivity, we move forward on Wednesday as planned, or we have to pivot on Tuesday. Is that a good checkpoint from your perspective, from the technology connectivity piece?
Chairman Kloppenstein, Trustee Johnson, forgive me if you feel like I'm being obtuse or I'm not understanding exactly where you're coming from. So as I'm standing here, the last option that we have available to us that I feel like that we could exercise between now and if things are not going well on Tuesday is to completely remove the filtering agent from our devices. The issue with that is that we have a legal obligation, according to federal law, the Child Internet Protection Act, to provide filtered internet access for our students. The ramification of not doing so is it could put the district's E-rate funding in jeopardy. We receive $1 million a year in that funding and reimbursement for our costs. I believe that we could make the case that we were uninstalling the filter agent with the intention of solving the near-term problems, and that we have every intention of reinstalling that filter once we had these issues resolved. I think that any option around installing an alternative solution is too technically daunting to consider at this time. So I really feel like our options are to work with the system that we have, explore the options that we have that we've identified in the short term, and then I feel like our last opportunity is to completely remove the filtering agent for our devices and let them have internet access and connect back to us. We, I think, would need to disclose that fully to our patrons to make sure that they understood and knew that students could access any content on the internet when those devices were at their home. But those are, I think, the only options. I think we have to work with the solution that we have. We are working with vendors to come up with that plan C, D, E, and F, that if we have something, we may need to make a purchase. There are products that provide, they're web-based products that you could point the workstation's domain name service to that would provide very basic content filtering. Those purchases, we would probably spin those up in a pilot circumstance. Vendors, because of COVID, vendors are making those available for pilot. We probably could get an extensive pilot to test one of those solutions, and then we would have to go through a purchasing process to make that a permanent solution. So those are technical solutions that we're vetting with our vendors, but the lift on that is, it's to implement some of those things is almost more daunting than to continue down the path and continue to try and troubleshoot the issue that we have. I think it's important to note that, you know, the decision to choose this filtering vendor was not a light one. When we transitioned and chose this vendor, we went through a very extensive process because of the problems we had with our last filter. This vendor has a number of clients that one of the important things that we noted about the features and functionality of the system obviously is important, but the experience with a large district was very important to us, and this vendor has that experience. We know that the solutions that we are using or that we attempted to use are functioning in other districts larger than us, up to 80,000 students. So what we attempted to do and what we are trying to do is not something that is not being done. It is being done. What is exactly wrong in our system, we still do not know. But I'm confident that we have identified some options that will get us there. And as much as I would like to promise that it will be easygoing and bug-free by early next week, I'm confident that we will make some drastic changes and some drastic improvements, and I think things will be much, much better. But that we may still be dealing with some issues as we try and get workstations updated and get them on the new system. Yeah.
Chairman Klopfenstein, trustees. I just want to maybe add a little bit to what I think when I hear Trustee Johnson asking this Tuesday as this kind of hinge point to make some decisions. That we'll know quite a bit by Tuesday in terms of is the solutions we've worked on making the necessary changes in terms of connectivity that we could feel confident that by Wednesday, the students who were in school physically Tuesday are going to be able to connect remotely from home. Like, we'll know that with pretty good confidence by Tuesday. If we feel like that's not the case and we're not confident, I do think that our next short-term solution might be to move to a more asynchronous process on the remote at-home learning day for a short term while we get things done, where the teachers, when you're physically in person, are going to have to figure out ways to give students some things more asynchronously via whether it be emailing them with content that they can be working on from home or videos they can be working on. They're not our ideal situation, but it could be a short-term solution in terms of what does Wednesday look like for those students working from home. And using our alternating days to do maybe a little more asynchronous work on those remote days, if we don't feel confident that we're going to be able to connect all students by Wednesday. It's not what we've planned for, it's not what we want to do, but it's certainly a way we could pivot in the short term to give the IT department more time to continue to build connectivity.
Brett, can I ask you, sorry, Mr. Heller, though, if the student's device can't connect, can they get that stuff? Can they get the emails? Can they get the videos? That's what I'm concerned about. So I actually assumed the out-of-class days right now are going to be asynchronous anyways, but if their devices can't connect, can they get the content, is the question.
So Chairman and trustees, and I'll let Devin, because he knows the technical details behind all this, but I know that some of the details in terms of things like being able to, whether if they're connecting their device to the internet, can they access emails? Can they access some of that? I'll let Devin speak to some of that a little bit more, but those are things that we would, once we know that that's a direction we would like to move and starting to plan for more of an asynchronous world on those alternating days in the short term, then we can start working with our teaching staff to figure out what are the best ways to deliver that. But in terms of email, we would be sending that email to both parents and students, so teachers would be sending that stuff like they would in other times of the year. Again, this is not anybody's best case scenario for the situation, but as I'm sitting and listening, those are things that I'm starting to think about in terms of if by Wednesday or by Tuesday we don't feel like we're getting close enough to where we need to be, how can we continue to move students learning forward when they're working remotely from home on an alternating day schedule without being able to guarantee connection for all students. So I'll let Mr. Lashman talk a little bit more about your question in terms of the technology side of that.
Chairman Klopfenstein, Trustee Johnson, from a technical perspective, that's what's so frustrating about our solution. We implemented the solution because we feel it's the way we implemented this using the VPN technology, we feel is the most secure. It makes sure that students, when they attempt to circumvent the filter, are less able to do so, and it provides us the most robust monitoring and logging. And that's not about monitoring and making sure that a student didn't, what a student actively searched for every day. It's about safety. And we have a lot of parents who get concerned about what their students accessed, and this provides us that robust logging that we feel meets the obligations that West Ada has to our patrons. Because of the VPN technology, if our capacity in our filtering system does not support the capacity for that VPN tunnel to be connected, literally that device may be connected to the internet, but it can't go anywhere. So they would not be able to use that device to get any email messages. During off-peak hours, of course, they would be able to, but they would have limited access to that. Having fewer students accessing and running Teams remotely and less people accessing video may resolve the issue. We don't know, because we don't know exactly what's causing this issue. We don't know if it's the amount of video traffic that is causing some of those connections to not be done. So there would still be, if we cannot find a way to increase the capacity of our current system, if we don't change the way those devices connect to us and they still remain on that VPN technology, that would be a continued struggle. Replacing the filtering agent and changing the way those devices connect to us would resolve all of those issues. And the benefit, I should mention, about moving forward, there are a lot of technical benefits around our VPN solution. That's why we chose it. We feel like it's the best technical and it provides the best service to our patrons and to our students. The benefit of the alternative approach is that when a device goes out and attempts to connect to a website, there is a decision at the local workstation about, do I need to connect to the district network to access this resource, or can I access it on my own? Through that mechanism, we can have all of our video, like any access to our Microsoft environment, any access to Discovery Ed, all of those video services, all of that, that internet traffic would be offloaded, and we would use that local connection to service that, and that traffic would not come back to the district. So as soon as we begin implementing this change, we are going to be building capacity to address this issue. So I'm very confident in our solutions for moving forward. I appreciate the board's concerns and hesitancy. I am not concerned about the technical, about getting it, about the solution working. My concern is how we implement the solution and that we don't make the situation worse in our attempt to make it better.
Chairman and trustees, Mr. Denton, who works in the IT department, as Kevin's talking, has been telling me in my ear kind of an option that we would have that on the physical day, so let's say team one is in the building, they're in their classroom, they have their devices with them. Before they leave that class period or that instructional day, there is a way where teachers could have those students they're connecting to our system that day physically in the building, and they are then essentially downloading those files and videos and things that they would need to use from home while they're in our building. And then when they go home, those will work because they're not requiring them to reach out to our filter. They're already being, essentially brought into their device before they take it home. So it's an option that we can explore. That's going to require, if that's, a direction we want to go in terms of a pivot, us to make sure that all of our teachers are aware of the steps they would need to lead their students through in the class period to do that. I think our teachers are more than capable if we give them the information, but that's, again, an option. It's not our favorite option, but it's an option that we could be moving towards midweek if we really felt like there's a concern. Again, I trust our team is working hard and they have found lots of good options. I think there's still some unknowns.
Actually, if you don't mind, Trustee Ozuna, it's been an hour and 15 minutes, and I haven't asked Trustee Newhoff if he had any questions. Trustee Newhoff, do you have any questions? I'm sorry.
Just real quick, a lot of the things already covered. Just two things, Devin. First off, I want to say I appreciate the level of effort you guys are putting. That's frustrating it is to get into a situation where you can't come to the answer as quickly as you want. But first question is, are there any security concerns you have? Maybe.
Was that cleared, Mr. Lashman?
Trustee Claflin.
Are there any security concerns with these solutions?
Chairman Klopfenstein, Trustee Newhoff, it's not exactly a security concern. The security on the device will still be managed via district policies. The one concern I have about implementing this solution is that when we have multiple students in a home, the logging for those students will not be complete. The last student who logs in and accesses the system through that internet connection will be the only student that gets logged. So the biggest issue we have is that when students are not on our system and they're accessing it, they will be filtered. They will receive the same level of filtering that they received while on our premise, but our logging will not be complete. So I do believe it's a concern. I think it's an acceptable risk at this time. It's not ideal.
Okay, thank you. My other question has to do with this Tuesday date. Will we actually not know if this all worked until Wednesday when Team 2 goes home and tries to use their computers?
Well, I think we will start seeing improvements in the system. We've seen improvements every day. I think we'll see bigger improvements the faster we can roll out the changes from the filter. So if you think about it, we might on Monday, it's possible that all of our students could have the capacity to connect. If only half of our students connect, the half of our students who are on premise Monday and only half are connecting remotely, by Tuesday we will see we will be able to determine how many people are connecting remotely who have implemented the change on Monday, and we'd know for sure on Tuesday during the day how well we had done.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. And Trustee Ozuna?
Mr. Lashman, when we talk about the students that are impacted by this, is it the same set of students every single day, or does it vary based on who's getting into the network first? And the reason that I'm asking that is, could we, if it's the same students every day, could we identify those and bring them in to get some support, even if it's not their Team 1 or Team 2 day? I don't think we could make it wide open, but if it's different students, yeah, I think that's a whole different problem.
Chairman Klopfenstein, Trustee Ozuna, that's a difficult question to answer anecdotally. I do know that we have people in this building who have devices and have students in our district, and we have examples where one particular student device, no matter when or what order the devices attempt to connect to the system, that one device does not connect, and the other device always connects. So, but I think we have a lot of examples where it depends on when you connect during the day, what services you're able to connect to, and what you're able to access. So I think one of our approaches is we're hoping to make this update available to those who are struggling to connect and have them either come to a building, having technical support available in our building. Some of our computer lab professionals, I spoke to their manager today to make sure that he could have them available even as early as tomorrow, so that people could go to a building and actually get some tech support to try and install this fix to solve it for those devices that are not working. I think our struggle is just the technical impact of making this change available to some devices and not pushing it to all. There's just a number of things that go into that, and that's the last pieces that we're working on, is how to deploy that. But I think my ideal scenario would be, if your device is working and you're connecting, you're not having issues, don't worry about it. We're going to make the fix available. If you can attempt to install the fix and it's not working, attempt to install the fix in the evening or early morning. If you have the opportunity, go to a school. If you don't have the opportunity, try and install the update over the weekend when our systems are running a little bit with a little bit more bandwidth. And then the worst case scenario is install it when you get to school on Monday. So that's my approach for making sure that this is available and being installed by those. Our goal would be to make it available for people who are having those connectivity issues, and allowing those who are not to continue to work.
Thank you very much. I truly appreciate this guidance. Obviously, we have a lot of discussion we've had, and there seems to be an understanding that through this week we're going to be looking at, or your team will be looking at options for Friday, and then potentially some weekend options, but we then have this Monday, Tuesday work through with students who come back into the building. And so our next pivot point, or I guess our next milestone for the board, probably be sometime in the late Tuesday timeframe. So at this point, I think we've definitely gone through every option we can think of at this point. I greatly appreciate your guidance and your support for what you're doing.
Chairman Klopfenstein, to be frank, this is your meeting, and I will answer questions for as long as the board cares to ask them of me.
Actually, I would, if you would be okay with the board, to move on to the item number 2, talking about teacher prep. So it seems like the question basically is an issue of training, and I'm assuming Mr. Heller would probably be, maybe not, I don't know. So the issue of training and how, if there is a concern with teachers, if training going into Monday is going to be an issue. I think that is the question. Is that correct, Trustee Johnson?
Mr. Chairman, maybe I can set the stage, because so this is the feedback that I've received, and it varies by middle, high school, and elementary. But and then I have some. This is anecdotal. I wish I had better data, but watching. So teachers right now are online all the time with the students that can connect, and their prep time is very limited. Plus, they're still trying to be there for their families to get the connectivity. I'm watching the chats, even in my own kids and other parents asking, like, I can't get this assignment, and I can't, so that's what's been going on. When we went in last week for device pickup, the question that parents asked in there was, what does yellow look like from a learning standpoint? And listening very intently for the answers and asking some other level of student or middle and high school, what does that look like? The answer has been, we haven't had time to prepare some of that. And so what I wanted to understand was, is there a good level of preparation that you feel or have seen from across the district that we are prepared for so connectivity, let's just assume connectivity happens. Do we have the instruction ready to go, or do we need to allow for some time on that?
Well, I will, Chairman and Trustees, do my best to try to answer. It feels like there's almost two questions there. There's a little bit about just teacher prep time in general.
Yes, sorry, let me clarify. One is ready for next week, and the other is what I've been hearing is this is a whole different way of teaching.
Correct.
It took us 60 years to get to where we're at in a system. We haven't had 6 years to get here, and it takes longer when you first do something. And do we have enough prep time built into our system to allow for that to happen long term? So I guess it is too.
Okay. So, Chairman and Trustees, I'll start with, are they ready for yellow? I can only, again, I think, as you've all stated, there's some anecdotal nature to anything. I've spoken to a number of teachers at all levels, and I'd say the majority of them say, I can't wait to get to yellow, because at least I can see my students every other day, physically get them in the room. I think these last few days have been very hard on our teachers. So in terms of wanting to connect with their students and having struggles with connecting with students. And in terms of, have we provided the levels of preparation? Have we given them the opportunities to train and prepare and plan as a PLC team? And yes, I believe that is 100%. The training that has been provided has been very strong. Each teacher, where they're at in terms of their readiness for a alternating day schedule, I imagine, like anything, is going to be all over the place. And there's going to be teachers who are going to be fine with it, and there's going to be some who are probably still concerned and struggle with it. I think a lot of them struggle that because their challenges this week in red have maybe, if not, for lack of a better word, derailed some of their plans for what they wanted to get done for all their kids. There's a nervousness about, on the days the students aren't physically with them, what will they be able to get students to accomplish? So I think there is some concern there, but that's still very connected to connectivity. In terms of once all of our students are able to connect and they are on an every other day schedule, will our teachers be able to execute that? I have no doubt. But like I think I said, these meetings are starting to run, blur together, probably for you as well. It's not going to be perfect. There are going to be glitches. There are going to be teachers who try something that they thought was going to be fantastic remotely, and it's going to fall flat on its face, just like it does for us as teachers when we're trying something instructionally in the classroom and we thought we have the best lesson plan in the world today and this is going to be amazing, and we get in there and we start delivering it to our kids and it falls apart, and we have to find ways to pivot and try new things. So yes, it's not going to be perfect. When some teachers are saying, I haven't even had time to think about that, makes my heart hurt a little bit, because I know that a lot of teachers that I've talked to have spent all summer thinking about that and have been planning about that. And I've talked to the majority of teachers who say, I can't wait to get to yellow so that I can start building a rhythm of every other day at least, seeing kids physically in class and then building in the alternating remote days. So again, anecdotally, from what I'm hearing, teachers are excited for yellow. I think they are nervous because it's something, again, like they've never done it before. They've never been asked to do what we're about to ask them to do.
Brett, let me ask the question. Let me put some details behind it, because I was looking at the survey around getting the elementary kids in every day. And it is a little different for elementary, and also might maybe ask Mr. Teese to speak to the same questions, but because they're potted, which is great, not the pod is a big piece of the safety piece, but because they're potted, they're with their kids at recess, which is where they used to get some time to prep. They're with their kids in potentially in specials, because the specials are in their classroom now, so which is when they would get some time to prep. So I guess what I'm looking at and is I guess I'm concerned. That's probably, I'm looking for some reassurance, because what I think we're saying is we're going to try it. There's going to be some hiccups, and I'm not owning that, but I want to think a little bit more about our system, and from a system perspective, how do we set it up for success? Because we're going to have some hiccups. I'm not going to say that we won't, but are we systematically set up for success right now with the way that from a prep standpoint to make sure that they get good quality education, because it doesn't feel quite like we are yet, I guess. And feeling is not necessarily how you make a decision, but.
So Chairman and Trustees, I guess the question you're referring to now is more towards question number 2, which is prep time. So the first question I feel like I was hoping to address is just teachers in general being ready for a movement into yellow. And we talk about teacher actual daily prep time to prepare for everything they need to do as a teacher. And I agree, at the elementary level, that's the area where I've heard the same concerns, especially as we consider moving more and more grades to every other day, or to every single day in-person instruction. What I will tell you is some of the discussions that I think I'm hearing are things like, for sure, as an elementary teacher, you'll have to be outside with your group at recess, or for sure, you're going to have to take your kids and you're going to lose your specials time. None of those things are for sure. So here's what I can tell you in terms of that, and maybe a systematic approach that we are taking to figure out some of those questions and answers. So the survey is one piece of that puzzle. We've asked the teachers, what's your level of comfort if you're a first grade teacher with all of your students coming to school daily? Additionally, we've contacted all of our principals and sent them a survey of sorts that asks them, what are your biggest concerns in terms of an everyday schedule? What are the biggest roadblocks that you believe we need to overcome? Tuesday of this coming week, our COVID task force will meet like they do every week, and we will spend a significant amount of time talking specifically about what's a good timeline for bringing grade levels back, as opposed to an arbitrary one. So how many weeks do you put in between a grade level before you bring a new grade level back? We're meeting Tuesday as well with all of the elementary principals in 2 different separate meetings to specifically go through all those things you just talked about. How do we handle lunch without it impacting teacher duty-free lunchtime? How do we impact teacher preparation time how do we take care of specials without taking away prep time? How do we handle recess without taking away prep time? So those are the solutions, but we're going to ask the principals of those buildings to be part of making some of those, thinking outside the box and doing tabletop exercises, if you will, on how do we handle some of these problems. So that is our plan, and that's, I think, why this idea of just bring everybody back isn't as simple as that sometimes, and we want to do it right, and we want to do it well, and that takes time and to bring people in. And to be honest, this week wasn't a good time to pull our principals out of a building to do some of those conversations, because they have plenty going on. Quite frankly, I feel uncomfortable even with next week because we have so much going on, but we also have to get these people in the building because they are, for lack of a better word, the experts about how this will work in their specific building. We need them to be part of the solutions that we need to identify. So that work will happen Tuesday. So much of Tuesday will be spent on what does K through 5 attending daily really look like, and what are the obstacles that we need to overcome, and what are the solutions to those obstacles. And I believe by the end of the day Tuesday, we're going to have a really good list of the problems and the concerns and out-of-the-box ways of thinking about solving those. And one of those big ones is, how do we do all this without taking away teachers' opportunity to prepare for what they need to do? And believe me, if I don't find the solution for this, my own wife, who's an elementary teacher, will not let me live that down. So we will have to find a way to do this well.
But I think, and I stressed elementary, and I know because you guys know I have elementary kids, you always think that's where I'm focused. But even today, I got feedback middle and high school are in the same boat. So I want to make sure, I know we got the elementary. Can you talk a little bit about those two as well?
Sure. So Chairman and Trustees, I will tell you that I will agree that this week it probably feels to teachers very much like prep time is at a premium. And I think that's because they are working their tails off to try to connect with kids that weren't able to connect during their class period. In terms of actual preparation time at the secondary level, they still have their prep period off. Like, so if a teacher has 3rd period prep, they still have 3rd period prep in yellow or in red. So that is a period where they're not expected to be connecting, whether remotely or physically, doing that work. Our teachers, as they always do, go above and beyond the call of duty, and they are using their prep time to reach out to every single family they couldn't connect with during 1st period, and they're doing that work. So as those situations resolve, I do feel like we're going to see that teachers are going to feel better about that. And as you mentioned, Mr. Thies is here. He may also can speak to what he's hearing. What I'm hearing is the biggest concerns are at the elementary level. that secondaries, the prep time issue, right, is a short-term issue because of the connectivity problems, that once the connectivity piece is not an issue, they'll be able to count on their prep time being purely a prep time. But as a former secondary teacher, your prep time takes a lot of forms, and it isn't always preparing for the next lesson. It's often answering emails. It's often, sometimes you're getting pulled into a meeting during your prep time, whether we always want to do that or not. So there's a lot of ways a teacher prep time takes, a lot of forms that takes. Every teacher would say they could use more opportunities for preparation and more opportunities to get ready for the next day. And yes, we are asking them to do new things in new ways. And so it feels, every teacher feels a little bit like a first-year teacher right now. And every first-year teacher feels like they'll never have enough time to be prepared. And that's a reality of this. And I don't have a good solution for how we give every teacher across the district more prep time than we already have available to them through the master contract.
Maybe I can ask this request, and just because you're going to have a little time on this, could you do some survey data around that for teachers so we kind of know where our general, because we've got anecdotal, but I think a little data to go with it would help understand kind of where the general consensus is around that. I actually have built online curriculum personally, and it does take longer the first time around. So that's, and good curriculum is good education. So that's probably where that's coming from. But if, you know, our teachers are feeling comfortable with the round of prep time they have, enough comfortability, then that's enough for me. So.
Thank you.
Any other trustees with questions? Trustee Smiley.
Thank you, Mr. Heller, and maybe Mr. Roberts can also help on this a little bit. The first one I think you could probably help with, Mr. Heller, and that is with the problems we seem to be having with connectivity. You know, and assuming that worst case scenario that some of these fixes don't get fixed. You know, my feeling is it makes it all the more important that we get those kids back in the buildings. And are we physically ready to go with that AB schedule in secondary and to you know, get the K-5 kids bit more aggressive on it, you know, or you know, with our facilities and where we are right now? Are you comfortable with that?
Chairman and trustees, I will say I feel very confident in our ability to go to yellow, and in fact, I'm very excited on Monday to be able to actually go out and see what it's looking like in our buildings and actually see how this is all playing out. I feel very confident in what's going to happen in yellow in our buildings. Cascade has assured us, and our folks have worked really hard with Cascade throughout this week, that we will have those buses on the roads and we will get our students to and from school that need to ride buses. The PPE stuff continues to go out. It's all sitting out in our loading dock. We've been delivering masks and shields and sanitizer and all those things throughout the week, continuing to make sure every school has what they need. So Mr. Yoakum and his department have done a great job of ensuring that every school has what they need in terms of that. In terms of more aggressive, or what level of aggressiveness we do to moving our K-5 back, that's part of what we're going to talk about next week. I have reached out to a number of folks to talk about what is a appropriate staggering of bringing grades in to also allow us to make sure we're gathering good data on how is it working as we bring grade levels in. So I've come up with a number of different drafts of possible timelines that we could use to bring grades 1st through 5th back, and our COVID task force will address that on Tuesday. We'll have our principals look at it as well on Tuesday. We will try to narrow down to at least a good next step, and we will start promoting that to our families. I think our short-term goal is we want to get 1st and 2nd grade back as soon as we possibly can. And so that is our next group that would come in, and for a number of reasons, both academically, and the size of those classrooms and all the different things. And I think as you looked at the survey results, which I'm happy to talk through more if you'd like me to, those grade level teachers are comfortable with that to a greater extent maybe than some of the older grade level teachers are at this point.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question kind of relates, and you brought that up with the survey, because I'm noticing, you know, looking that over just with the K through 5 teachers, the majority at each level is saying, and it's in some grades it's higher than other grades, but the majority is saying yes. And when I look at the teacher comments section, most of those teacher comments are saying, I can't wait to see my kids, and which is exactly the way teachers should feel, because that's why they take the job. And the question I have, and here again, maybe Mr. Roberts can help out with this a little bit. How are we doing personnel-wise? Do we have, I look at those separation reports that we get every month with interest, because I try to keep in my head a little bit of how many people we have coming and going, how many people have requested leaves of absence, and so on. And I know there's a million different reasons for people doing that, but we can get a feel. So how are we looking at year to year with our staff turnovers? How are we looking as far as, do we have everybody in place as far as aides go, as far as staff? Are we ready to roll with having all the classrooms manned and all of our spots filled?
I will turn this over to Mr. Roberts. He can answer that question much better than I.
Chairman Klopfenstein, Trustee Smiley. As you can imagine, personnel has been a bit of a different year this year. The direct answer to the question is yes, we are ready to go. We have staff. We have had, every time the board has made a decision or we've made different decisions on how school is looked, we've had certain different reactions from staff. So we have had resignations as of this week when we announced we were going to yellow. There's teachers not comfortable with that, and they've resigned. But the other fact of the matter is we're down in enrollment, 1,800 students, and we don't need the same staff that we had before. So far, we're in very good shape in the classrooms. We are hiring some teachers currently right now. We've been able to make some movement with teachers, so we haven't had to hire a new teacher. Just move them. In kindergarten, that we had a teacher that had some capacity and we're able to move. As far as our aides, because as you know, our budget is very tight and we have been fairly conservative on hiring some of those people back, but we are in full bore hiring mode right now, getting ready for yellow, getting ready for school. I have, again, complete confidence that we will have all the staffing that we need. I will say in most of our classrooms, especially in elementary, our class sizes will be the lowest that they have been in the entire time I've been here in West Ada on that, based on where we're at. So I'm very confident that we're in good shape.
Any other questions? Trustee Newhoff, do you have any questions on this topic?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first question, I just want to, I want to get these kids back in school too, and we need to do it safely. And if you look at the some of the responses, for instance, to the survey and some other feedback I've gotten, it sounds like we haven't got all the hand sanitizer dispensers installed. There's some concerns about whether we have to where it has to be. Can you? And this is kind of a facilities question, which was there, but it's. Can you, and in terms of training them, the teachers are going to do sanitation. Has all that been done?
So, Mr. Chairman and trustees, I caught, I think, most of what Trustee Newhoff was asking, and as he noted, these are more Mr. Yoakum's ball game than mine, but I will try to pinch hit. We have received, I'd say of the dispensers, the actual hand sanitizers, I think we've received 50% of what we've ordered. In terms of distribution of those, obviously the first triage of getting those dispensers out was to classrooms that do not have a classroom sink. So if a classroom doesn't have a classroom sink, and then we're going to make sure it has the hand sanitizer dispenser. Elementary classrooms, those who do have a sink did not necessarily get the first wave of those hand sanitizer dispensers because they can do hand washing. But as those continue to come in, we continue to get those mounted by the maintenance department and get them into every classroom. In the interim, while those classrooms do not have the wall-mounted hand sanitizer station, that we've purchased just a pump of sanitizers for every one of those classrooms as well. So my wife's classroom has a sink, but she also has a bottle of hand sanitizer that's available in her classroom. So those things have been done to ensure that every classroom does have what they need. And as the dispensers come in, we're going to add those to those rooms that already have a sink. So like everything else in a COVID-related world, when you order something like this, you run the risk of supply issues coming up. And so I believe they have a short-term plan for when those are going to arrive. I wouldn't want to be quoted on when that actually is, because that's a Mr. Yoakum thing, and he's not able to be here tonight. But I believe the PPE pieces, we feel very confident those are all going to be here, and that we've done the triage to make sure classes at least have a sink if they don't have a hand sanitizer station in their classroom. In terms of training, all of our teachers were required to watch. Is about a 90-minute training by Tracy Garner, our health services supervisor, that went through all of the different components that you need to know in terms of being able to teach in a environment where we have to be thinking more about the health and safety precautions as opposed to just the instructional precautions. And it's not just teachers that were required to watch that. Basically every employee across our district is being asked to watch that. It's 90 minutes long. It's fabulously well done. A lot of information. So our teachers have watched that already as part of their 8 days that they were on contract and working prior to starting the year. And the rest of the staff at each building, each principal is kind of making sure every staff member has watched that and is aware of those protocols.
Does that answer your
Okay,
question?
Yeah, that answers it. I know there's some concern. The other thing I want to explore is the survey results to some extent, and as Trustee Smiley pointed out, the majority of people at various grade levels, and it varied on grade level, were comfortable with the kids coming back in full, but certainly some weren't. And if you go down and kind of look at the people that responded 0, that they're not comfortable at all. Do we know why that is? Do we have plans to figure? Is there something structural in terms of preparations we can do to make the environment safer? Are there things in the school plans or classroom plans that could be better? Or are the majority of them people that are in particularly sensitive groups or have family members and that kind of thing? Do we have a handle on that? And because the thing that would concern me is you have a teacher who's really uncomfortable, and we put a full class of kids in there, and they realize what it's like, and they just can't handle it. And then we're dealing with turnover, and that's not going to help the kids either.
So Chairman and Trustees, I guess I will start by saying, I would hate to generalize who answered 0. I think we hear anecdotally that some of it's philosophical. They feel generally very nervous about the idea of all the students returning back to their classroom, and there's a lot of folks who just are very fearful still about this. And I think it's important to keep in mind these folks haven't been in a classroom full of kids for quite a while now, and I do look forward, and I think they all look forward to next week as we kind of break that barrier of getting half of our students back. And I do think that will have a positive impact in folks starting to feel closer to normal and starting to think about what it might look like. I've heard from many teachers who have concerns about the inability to physically distance in the classroom, and concerns about things like, how is this going to impact my prep time? There's all sorts of varying reasons why folks might answer a 0. So I wouldn't want to generalize, and I don't know, and I'd have to reach out to see if we were able to trace those who answered 0 at a grade level and then read their specific comments. We probably can do that, but that would take a little bit more time to dive into that data than we've had today, since those results are kind of done. I will say I agree that there's concerns when I look at 4th grade, and you can say here's what the percentage of 4th grade teachers are that say they're very uncomfortable. When you look at that actually as a number, that's 14 4th grade teachers who say I am very uncomfortable across our district. And I certainly don't want to lose 14 4th grade teachers. And so those are concerns that we have to look through. And I will tell you, as we work with our building principals, teachers' level of comfort is going to be directly correlated to their building leaders' ability to have a plan that shows them how it can be done well. And that's why we need to bring those building principals in next week and do that work. Because I think until we get a way to show them, here's how it's going to look, there's so much unknown for a teacher. Unknown leads to lack of comfort for a lot of folks. And so I will say we need to build more clarity for our teachers so that they have a better understanding of what they're going to be asked to do and what it's going to look like. You know, when I look at the survey results, I think as I talked about at the last survey regarding kinder and pre-K, in terms of how you look at a survey, that 6 to 10 range being the comfortable range of a survey. 1st grade, 68% were in that comfortable range, 66% at 2nd grade. 3rd grade, interestingly, down to 47% comfortable, really almost a 50-50 split when you look at 3rd grade. 4th grade, more are saying they're in the uncomfortable range than the comfortable range. I would have predicted, if you asked me, that our most uncomfortable group of teachers would have been our 5th grade teachers. That's not the case. 60% of them are listing themselves as in the comfortable range. So surveys are as good as each person, how they look and answered that question, and so we do our best to use it as one point of information. Next week we're going to use the meetings we're going to have as another level of information, and then we're going to try to make the best decision we can, both in terms of timeline and what solutions we can put in place to help our teachers and our principals feel like they can execute the plan successfully.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Thank you very much. Trustee Ozuna.
Maybe just a really quick question from me. I don't know if the survey would tell you that, but do you know if the comfort varies by school? Some of our schools are older, the airflow is different. You know, we have, I've heard from some teachers that are a little bit more uncomfortable in some of our older schools. And have we made accommodations to handle some of those things as best as we can? Or is that the feedback you're going to gather from the administrators to then look at and see what we need to do to fix any of those areas?
It's a great question, Chairman and Trustees. I would say that our principals clearly know who their teachers are in their buildings who are very uncomfortable with this. And I don't know if that is more at a older building versus a newer building. Our survey results don't give us that information. So we certainly will continue to talk about the differences that each facility has. So we talk about our building health and safety plans. Those are very specific to that school. Well, those plans will have to change to accommodate a new K through 5 coming every day. And our principals are aware of that. They've already been kind of thinking through those things. And then you have every principal's different level of comfort, philosophy, what they bring into the table that we're going to navigate on Tuesday. So I think a lot of those answers will come out as we look at things, and I know that our principals are going to say, yeah, that works for your building, but it doesn't work for mine. So then our question is, so what does work for your building? How do we overcome that obstacle in your specific building? And so that's what we're going to have to work through next week with our folks. And I again, like we've done with everything, we continue to talk about what if we could. What if we could do it? If the answer is we can't, that this obstacle is too big for us to overcome, then we need to be able to come forward and say that we have an obstacle that's too big. I don't believe there's obstacles that are too big when it comes to this. I think we can get this done, but we have to take our time and do it correctly.
Mr. Chairman, I have one quick question. The survey responses, what percentage of teachers actually filled out the survey response? Because the number seems small to me, but maybe, I mean, I'm still new enough. I don't know how many.
645 teachers answered out of 947. So 97 actually. So fairly high. Now per grade level, obviously, I look at 5th grade, 86 teachers responded to that. So those are things we can do. Okay, yeah, that's a good point. So we didn't have this board meeting on our radar when we sent the survey out. So these are by the end of the week responses so they'll have to the end of the day Friday. So we'll have a better better numbers. Once we have those, we can provide those to the board so you can see the newer numbers by the end of the week.
Excellent. So thank you very much. And I think we'll move on then to item number 3, which is making up lost school days. And I'm assuming this is surrounding pretty much the first 4 days of this month, of this week. Trustee Johnson, if you would, I'm not 100% sure exactly how to frame this. So if you would, give us an overview of what your thoughts are.
Yeah, and I'm not going to pick a person. So I think I'll leave it to Dr. Reynolds to pick a person. But I think the question is, well, there's 2 things. So one, we know not all of our students could get in. And so, last spring we were trying to make sure everybody had equal access to education. Well, now we know that we didn't get that this week. So I wanted to just talk through if there's an opportunity from someone from the district to talk through. It doesn't have to be specifics on what we do, but how do we move forward and start to figure out ways to cover making up those lost school days? So what's the best planning or action or structure to do that? And maybe that's Dr. Randalls or Mr. Roberts, I don't know, but just wanted to understand, because I think as a board we have to say, and Dr. Randalls, I think we have to say, do these days count or do they not? I personally don't think they do, but because we didn't get enough, we don't know what we got. But if we say that, then the question is, okay, now what do we do to help make sure that we get those in, and where do we go? So that's where I'm kind of wanting.
Chairman, trustees, this is kind of a new question for us, so I'm not sure I know an exact answer for you, but I can tell you from a technical perspective, the days weren't canceled. So they still count as days of instruction. But we agreed that we'll have to do some more footwork and some research in terms of what the kids, who were the children who weren't able to log on and what instruction did they miss. And that will just take us a little while to pull that information together from our classroom teachers, and then talk about the instruction at each of the grade levels. And so let's look at maybe the students missed out on a phonics lesson, and is there a way to make that up without making the students or the parents at home or the teachers overwhelmed? So I just think we need to do a little bit more. But technically, the reports we turn into the state, our calendar that the board approved, it's not like a snow day. I mean, we didn't cancel school. And so the tough part is some of our students were able to log on, some of our students weren't. So we'll go back and reassess in the next couple of weeks. We are gearing up for some readiness assessments, and I think that will really help us have a baseline data in terms of how much the kids may have lost over the last several months, but will give us some baseline data in terms of where their learning is right now. We haven't started that yet. For example, you're very familiar with the IRI, and so we'll be giving that fall assessment as soon as things settle down a little bit. And I think the window for that begins, I think it already has begun statewide. So it won't be long before we start doing those kinds of things, and then I think it will help us to know how to make up those days. So are there options in terms of capturing those hours or those days? There are a number of possibilities. Some are more expensive than others. Some would require negotiations, opening up again. So it doesn't mean those things can't happen, but I think we have to have a realistic view of what would be best and most prudent as we're moving forward, so.
Thank you. I think that's really helpful. Maybe I can ask one more question, but can I make a statement first, just to kind of set the stage a little bit? I really rely on you guys to help me with how the operations can work best. And I see, at least personally, see my role as a trustee to clear any paths that need to be cleared and roadblocks that need to be moved to make sure that that happens. And also give enough time. Sometimes we don't always have it, but enough time to figure that out. So when it comes to clearing roadblocks for connectivity, clearing roadblocks for teacher prep time, clearing roadblocks to make sure that the students get the education, you know, we got all these requirements around hours and all that kind of stuff, and those are just counting numbers. It's around, actually, you call it competency-based education, right? That's the term now. Whatever it is we need, I'm supportive of giving our kids that education. We just need you to tell us what that looks like. So my question is, how long do you need to tell us what that looks like from the make up lost days piece?
Trustees, Chairman, I don't know that I have a magic date, but I know our cycle of learning, teaching and learning as we go through, and just because it's different this year, here's what I know and love. Our teachers are geniuses in all sorts of ways, but when it comes to routines, I am amazed watching how teachers teach kids to go through certain routines to help them feel safe, to help them be excited about learning, to keep things organized. So when I think about all the things we're watching since everyone came back on contract, and what we're learning and what we're being frustrated about, and those routines are different than we've ever had to worry about before. So in those conversations with the teachers, I think there's a little time where we have to get to that level of routine and comfort and feeling this is how we do things. Now we're safe. Now we're confident. And I would just say, if I had to guess, I would say about halfway through the first quarter, we might be able to that's when we really start to see which students might need additional intervention services, or and it won't be on everything. I mean, it would just be on those concept, skills, processes that we start with from the beginning of the year through about the middle of the first quarter. Some of our teachers will know in the first week which students are going to need additional time and support. But I would say for 56 schools, if we're looking at adding time or coming up with some creative ways to recapture that time for the kids, I'd wait a month or so and then let us reassess and come back and let you know what we need, because that's very exciting. I'll just add a couple of other little things that I am so impressed and these are not all easy things, but here are some of the questions that we ask. Do you believe that school is the best, safest place for our children to be right now? And the answer is resoundingly yes. And then the next question is, do you feel safe at school, whether you're an adult or a child? So all of the safety precautions we put in place, all of the routines that we're trying to implement, masks, hand washing, all of those kinds of things that are different than what we've ever done before. Is that helping you to feel more safe? And you were reading the articles, we're sharing the best practices, we're watching what other schools are doing who've been in school longer than us. Are you starting to have that safe feeling when you're in school, whether you're an adult or a child? Do you feel safe? If you're starting to feel safe, then the last question is a little harder, but we have to ask it. We have to do that honesty part. Are you willing to accept a certain level of risk in coming back to school? Because we know that's a truth. That's a level of honesty. So those are three big pieces. And then in an application way, when I'm watching our principals and our teachers going about the business of getting ready, and this will help us determine what is working well and what might not be working so good. But here are the things that I watch over and over and over again from an organizational development standpoint in application. 56 schools, every classroom, every building. I watch our folks the last few weeks planning. They're planning for every kind of scenario. They're planning for great instruction. They're planning to make kids feel like $1 million. But planning has just been something I marvel and appreciate so much from our administrators, our teachers, our classified staff, our custodians. So just think about that for a minute. In a district as large as us, planning, how important that has been. How we model. So that's all going to be part of our new culture, is how we model those behaviors that we are expecting. And that really comes from our parents. It comes from our teachers when they work with the kids. And actually, one of the things that we've witnessed all summer long is our students have been the most amazing models for some of these new behaviors and new routines. Plan, model, and the third piece is monitoring. So we haven't really been able to do that part yet, but I know just from listening and watching what's happening in the classrooms that we're monitoring how effective are we being. So is everyone following? I'm just using routines as an example. I mean, you could extrapolate that to learning, to teaching and learning. So are we effectively monitoring through quality data? Are we asking questions of kids and the adults that would be anecdotal, so we could start doing more of a qualitative kind of assessment? Planning, modeling, monitoring, celebrating. It is just so important right now to find and celebrate all of the amazing things that are happening. There are some not so amazing things happening. It's really been difficult. But there are also some pretty amazing things going on, and I think that's the other part that we're actually struggling to do right now, is to celebrate and say there are good things going on. And I think the last piece is persistence. And our board demonstrates that all the time, but it's just another piece of that organization of teaching and learning that I know and love so well, and that I have such admiration for our folks. Out of that, it's this new cadence for learning, that it's like learning to ride a bicycle. It'll just take us some practice, but there's no doubt in my mind that we'll get there. And so the great, I know I've given you a whole bunch more information than what you asked for, but it all, to me, in my mind, as a superintendent and looking at the big picture, it all goes back to, these are very specific questions that underpin about 1,000 more questions that happen all the time. So when it comes to making up instructional time, that's a piece. But I think the part of that is putting that into that big context of this new culture that we're creating. And then that will lead us to come up with some great ways to make sure that our students haven't missed anything. And I just don't know what that answer is right now, because I have to find out what it is they missed.
Mr. Chairman, one more question for Dr. Reynolds, and I'm going to, I've had a phone conversation about this, and I am going to put you on the spot a little bit, so I'm apologizing in advance. We get a lot of feedback from all sorts of places around how schools should operate right now. I want to know, as a superintendent, you teach us all the time, we're the governing body, you run the district. What is your preference for how we move forward you've probably had a lot of this information yourself, so a lot of this is new to us, but what is your preference for how we move forward with the connectivity right now, and how we continue, and what would you like to see happen from that perspective? Because I think we're experiencing, and you are too, the feedback of all the challenges. We're looking for the solution. We've got, everybody's got ideas, but from that CEO perspective, what's your recommendation?
Chairman, trustees, I am surrounded by the best team anywhere. I am smart enough to know that Mr. DeLashmutt is our best resource, and all of the individuals in his team. So if he's recommending that he would like to see what we can do tomorrow with the system, and knowing that on Monday and Tuesday, if it still isn't working tomorrow, then on Monday, as the students come back to school, we'll take their devices and reconfigure them. And what I heard him say tonight was he's feeling very confident about that. I'd like to support Mr. DeLashmutt in what he's recommending.
Trustee Ozuna.
I have a quick comment on the making up lost school days concept, and probably just a comment, but something that I really want you to consider as you look at the calendar and decide what to do. There's a lot of students that dropped off early in the spring. And well, maybe I shouldn't say a lot, but by the end of the spring and as we started into summer, we lost many. And I think we're all expecting to see gaps in learning. So moving into this first quarter, this first semester, there's already a gap to fill, and now we're losing up to a week. That's even more complicated, I think, for secondary at Virtual Schoolhouse and high school with our traditional schools. And I think we need to weigh that. And I'm sure there's impacts at the elementary school too. I'm not as close to those. But I think we need to weigh that really closely to make sure that we're already in a shortened time frame because we have this whole gap. If it was just this glitch that we had, I don't know if glitch is the right word, it's not the right word actually. But if we were just struggling through this, that's one thing, but we have this gap to fill as well in a really condensed period of time. So I think we have to consider that when we look at if we need to fill some of these pieces in. And so when we talk about maybe mid-quarter, knowing what that might look like, it might not, that might be too late to know. So I just hope that that's in consideration as well.
Trustee Newhoff, did you have any questions for Dr. Reynolds?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't. Just one quick question or a comment is that I think some of the biggest impacts we're going to see are potentially in some of the high school classes that are in quarters because the kids are only going to have, 7, 8 more weeks. So, I would encourage administration to pay particular attention in those scenarios, and not downplaying the struggles in elementary at all, but to make sure that particularly kids that are in a class that's just a quarter, that we can that we reach out to the teachers and make sure that they were able to get what the kids needed. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. And that then brings us then to,
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, can I make one last comment? I'd actually request that we put some data behind that if you can, when you reach out to the teachers. It's really helpful for us from a decision-making standpoint. Just to put some data behind that, so as you work through that, just some data to go with it would be really helpful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry about that.
you're fine. That then brings us then to the action portion. And again, Trustee Johnson, you have to guide me on this. So the action portion was a revised opening plan, if you'd help guide us.
So, Mr. Chairman, this is awkwardly the newbie guiding, right? So you get what you get. So I think we didn't have a lot of the information we had tonight. I think first, before we take action, it'd be good to hear what the board's thinking. On the questions that we had coming into this were, do we need to pivot now, or do we need to wait, right? Can we get things working? Do we have a plan? Was really because it didn't feel like we did. So I think I'd look to see my fellow board members where they're at. I have some thoughts, but I'd rather hear everybody else's first.
Trustee Newhoff, would you like to start?
You don't really have a whole lot. I mean, given that this issue of the connectivity involves more than just the schools are going into yellow next week. It's also VSH, I assume. I don't see where we have a lot of choice but to kind of move forward with with sort of the plan as Mr. Delashman and Mr. Heller laid out. Going through Tuesday, and let's keep a really close eye on what's going on. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Trustee Smiley?
Mr. Chairman, couple of things. Number one, the feedback we're getting, I noticed, perhaps some of you others have noticed that there was a letter that came later this afternoon from the Republican members of our district legislative delegation, which is something that we'll need to look at and be concerned with. There's a lot of pressure, and I think we're feeling it all. And I think that, as far as reopening, I've said this several times, we need to figure out a way to get our kids back in class. I know we have to do it safely. I know we have to go forward with the yellow plan that we had, and you don't change horses in midstream. I think that's the plan we're moving forward with. We have to move forward with it. But I think that as we look at reopening and as we look at transitioning down the line, those are concerns we have to look at. And also, there's a concern that we are getting active cases in our community of COVID. And, we got an update on, what those numbers look like as of today. And fortunately, it's still relatively light, and hopefully we can keep it that way. So those are concerns that I think we all have, and that I particularly have.
Trustee Ozuna?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that it's good that we had an action item on here in case the information that we received tonight, if we needed to take action. I don't necessarily feel like we do. I mean, we know that our staff are not ready for green. We know that from our survey results at the elementary level. We know that we need to get some kids first into our classroom and see how that goes and work some of these things out. so we know that about a green status, and I don't necessarily see that we need any other revisions at this time. However, I would ask tomorrow through the weekend, Monday, I mean, those are critical days, and I think that it would probably be very beneficial if we could gather again on Tuesday. And I guess I would make that request and leave it up to everybody else if they think that that's an option. But I do think that kind of as we work through this thing, it might be wise for us to have a shortened agenda and meet frequently. Thank you.
Trustee Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was actually going to be my thoughts as well, is to just postpone the actions until Tuesday and let that time for Mr. DeLashment to see if we can get connectivity working up, because it's the long pole in the tent and it's the linchpin to the system right now.
I'm assuming then for item number 1, there is no action. Item number 2, what are your thoughts there? And I guess we could start with Trustee Smiley. That's okay.
Well, I think right now, we don't know how much time we have lost, what our attendance numbers look like as far as through the week with the connectivity issues and so forth. I absolutely believe that we cannot punish any students because, you know, of hardware and software issues. You know, so, you know, that's something we will have to look at. But I don't think we have the information and the data to move forward at all.
Trustee Newhoff? I guess
I don't see the need for action at this point.
Thank you very much. Trustee Ozuna?
I agree with Trustee Newhoff. I'll be anxious to kind of see what recommendations might come.
Trustee Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think based on that, you haven't actually said where you're at, but so I think I can make a motion to postpone action now based on that kind of feedback, if that's the appropriate time to do it.
I'm assuming table would be the...
Yeah, I was just reading off the agenda where it says postpone action, but table is
Oh, I
perfect.
beg your pardon. Yes,
Yeah, so I would move that we table action item number 1 until Tuesday of next week.
So we have a motion. Is there a second? Trustee Ozuna with a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 And aye as well. So it's chairman, so it's unanimous. Item number 2, school calendar adjustment request.
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, I need to ask a question of Trustee Ozuna or Trustee Newhoff on this one, because it really hits the high school calendar. So I was looking at our board meetings to postpone this request for this action to come forward to September 22nd or October 13th. Those are midway through the first quarter. That might be too long. So I wanted to see if Trustee Ozuna or Trustee Newhoff had some idea of where the best spot to postpone this action would be.
I'm glancing at Mr. Heller and Dr. Rannells for how much time they might need to give that some consideration.
Chairman Klopfenstein, Trustee Johnson, I guess if you're talking about secondary and especially high school, if we're in the quarter system, God gave us 24/7 and the calendar's running and that quarter ends when the quarter ends. So the consideration would be Saturday school or something like that to make up these days. It's not merely, it's not a simple answer of, and besides that, that adds contract days with teachers. It adds a lot of things. It adds extending school days. I think, I understand clearly and understand where we're at that some instruction hasn't happened. I don't think it's all instruction, and I do think Trustee Ozuna and Trustee Newhoff can speak to that with their own children. But we do have amazing teachers, and they know the standards those kids need to learn, and they're going to make that happen in a quarter. So I don't think there's a simple answer of simply adding days at the end of the school year or anything else in the secondary level, for sure. And I don't know that that's efficient, as far as making up these days anyways. I think our teachers are going to make up that learning during the time that they have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I can make a motion out of that. I think what I would move is that district staff report back to the board on the September 22nd meeting whether or not we need to address making up lost days, and if so, what the process is or how we will go about recommending to do that.
Thank you for that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Trustee Ozuna with the second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Chairman's aye as well, so it's unanimous. That then brings us then to item C, to be executive session. The person who makes this motion, please read the entire text.
I can make it, Mr. Chairman. I move that the board go into executive session per Idaho Code 74-2061B to consider the evaluation, dismissal, or disciplining of, or to hear complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent or public school student.
Thank you for that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Trustee Ozuna with the second. We'll start with Trustee Johnson for voice vote.
Aye.
Trustee Ozuna?
Aye.
Trustee Newhoff?
Aye.
Trustee Smiley?
Aye.
And Chairman is aye. So we'll enter into executive session. We'll take a 5-minute break between the sessions and convene in the remote room.
Mr. Chairman, I think just because I know there's people listening online, we would say there's no action after this on our agenda. So if folks want to sign off, we'll come back and adjourn.
There
but-
is no action if you'd like to.
Okay,
if
yeah,
you'd
I
like
just
to
thought
go
that might
to
help
bed.
people get their
Okay.
evening back.
Excellent, thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah, just a logistical point. How do you want me to call in for that?
I'll give you a call.
All right.